Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lawrence Singleton, Dean of the Lubin School of Business. I'm pleased to welcome to the Dean's Roundtable today, Ms. Roberta Esther. Roberta Esther is a business strategist and diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI thought leader. She is currently employed as a Senior Vice President of Enterprise Strategy Initiatives at Bank of America. Ms. Esther specializes in the strategy and implementation of programs focusing on simplifying and improving processes. She also has experience in planning and analysis, as well as establishing and executing control frameworks for specific products within the banking industry. Ms. Esther has a powerful voice in the DEI space and serves as an advocate and advisor dedicated to hiring, mentoring, and retaining diverse talent across all levels. She's the first Vice President and Director of Institutional Partnerships at the National Association of Black Accountants, or NABA, New York chapter. That's also one of her other roles. She's a rising entrepreneur and partner at Young Ambitious One, LLC, a learning and career development platform with 1,300 members dedicated to bridging the opportunity gap in business, technology, and entrepreneurship. She is dedicated to bridging the opportunity gap and help to foster and create a more equitable future for historically underserved communities. Ms. Esther holds a BBA from Lubin in International Management, class of 2012. She also received a certificate from Dyson in Latin American Studies. Roberta Esther is a very good example of successful alumni from the Lubin School of Business, and I'm pleased to welcome her to the Dean's Roundtable. Ms. Esther, I'd like to start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself, and welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This feels like I'm back home. Before I go into my story, the last year I was at Lubin. I was actually an attendee at the Dean's Roundtable. So this is definitely a full circle moment for me. I was a student leader at the time, and I think we had probably just kicked it off maybe a couple semesters before then. And I was very excited to attend. We were in person on the 6th floor. We were with the dean in the room. So this is definitely different to be via Zoom, but I definitely remember being very excited to hear from business leaders. So when the folks wanted me to be part of the Dean Roundtable, it was definitely a very cool full circle moment. So happy to be here. I know I've probably seen some of you over the past couple of months as I've been doing other speaking engagements with Pace University, my alma mater. So very proud to be a Pace alum. Thank you again for having me. So I'll kick off with, I guess we'll start from somewhere near the beginning. I was born and raised in Haiti. Which is an island in the Caribbean. I came to the United States at 14 years old. I went to high school upstate New York, and I love business, and I understanding business from a non-US centric perspective was always something that I was passionate about. I read a lot of books, and I was really interested to understand the interconnection of business across the world. So I found Pace University, and it was on Wall Street. And I thought, if there's anywhere in the world that I should be to go to college, it would be in New York City. So I definitely did not want, I wasn't looking for, the traditional campus experience, but I thought, how cool and exciting to be studying business at the center of it all. So that's what drew me to Pace University, and they did not disappoint. So I had an amazing 3 years at Pace. I graduated with my BB in International Business, minor in Finance, and a certificate in Latin American Studies in 3 years. How did I do it? The deans, like Dean Singleton, who were there, definitely saw the potential in me and saw that I was very driven for success. And they really supported me toward my studies and let me take the 21 credits. Also ill-advised, there's a lot of classes, but it definitely supported me in my studies. If I had to summarize my Lubin story, I would say the one word would be opportunities. And I felt like when I came to Pace University, I definitely felt at home. It felt like many students were very different, like myself. We all come from different backgrounds. We all had different interests. So I didn't feel like the other. I felt very much at home. I felt at home in New York City. I felt at home studying business here in the heart of it all. And I remember I had friends that went to school, in more traditional campuses, and I would post pictures of being a business student. They were like, where are you going? I'm like, to class. Some of business classes required us to dress up and do presentations, just like the real world. So that's definitely the number one thing that I appreciate about Pace University is that it was hands-on learning. what I felt like I was learning, I was able to apply it at my internships. And it just felt like I was in it. It wasn't like I was a student and then at some point I would, go into the future of being a professional. I felt like I was learning it as I was going. So when I came to Pace University, I joined an organization. A couple of students saw me and they said, "Hey, have you heard of NABA?" And I was like, "I have not, but I'm a business student. Tell me more." So I joined the National Association of Black Accountants on campus. And that's where kind of my leadership journey started and my DEI journey started as a freshman at Pace. Whereas I was able to join that organization, I was able to land a couple of positions, my first job at JPMorgan Chase through that organization. And now I'm part of their executive board of the New York professional chapter. So to kind of bridge all of that to say that, this is a place where I definitely attribute a lot of my success, a lot of the beginnings of things that I still do today, I trace back to connections and support and networks that I created while on campus at Pace University. So if you guys are back on campus, definitely reach out to the clubs and be involved and be part of the fabric of what makes the university great. That's how you're going to get the most out of it. So to take a turn into my career and how I got where I am today. So while I was at Pace, I was a sophomore. And I remember reaching out to Career Services, Helene Cruz, who I still speak to this day. And I said, "Hey, I would like to get, my resume ready. I want to get an internship." And it was like, "You're a sophomore, it's a little bit early." However, again, like herself, like most faculty and staff at Pace were like, "Well, if you want to get started, let's talk about it." So we got my resume ready and I was interested in an internship. And my first internship was a woman that had graduated from Pace University. She was an alumna and she was working at Deutsche Bank and she had started on a new team and she did an intern. And Helene said, "You should meet with this person. Roberta is very dedicated. She's ambitious. Speak with her and see, would this be a good internship for you?" So I went to Deutsche Bank on 60 Wall Street. I never forget that day where I felt like, oh my God, here I'm a business student walking into a giant bank on Wall Street. And I walked in and I had my interview, was very nervous, but I got the job on the spot. And again, to go back to my Lubin connection, this person was a master's student at Pace University. She had graduated. And when she had jobs opening, she came back to Lubin and said, "Do you guys have students available?" So that was my first entree into banking. So before that, I never thought of myself as working at a bank. I actually wanted to work at the UN, which is what I studied, international management. I wanted to do microeconomics. I wanted to do microloans. And help other underdeveloped nations such as my country. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. But after interning at Deutsche Bank, I just found that this was definitely the place for me. I felt like I was very much motivated by the structure. It was complicated, it was big, but I navigated it very well. And Dean Lean Byrne, who's no longer with us, who was a dean at Lubin at the time, said, "You should minor in finance if you're going to work at a bank." So I'm like, that's true. I probably should get some of these upper level finance courses in there just to make sure I'm prepared. And again, this is another example of faculty and staff looking out for me and making sure that I was doing the right thing. I was on the right track to success. So I minored in finance. I interned at Deutsche Bank the whole year of my sophomore year. Then I landed an internship at JPMorgan Chase after that. And that's where I stayed for most of my career until a few years ago, recently moving to Bank of America. So my banking career started because a Lubin alum hired me into Deutsche Bank as an intern part-time while I was a sophomore in college. So that's kind of how I got into banking. Now, when I studied at JPMorgan through their finance program that I was part of, so the way those programs work is that you do a 2-year rotation and then you kind of figure out what you want to do afterwards. So it was within finance. So I did my 2-year rotation. I did really well, and I just kept progressing within the company within the finance line of business. You guys will hear the word LOB, means line of business, different functions within a bank. So I made it to vice president within that function at JPMorgan Chase before I moved over to be in enterprise strategy at Bank of America. And I would say what are the things that help me kind of go from one role to the next, or how to figure out your next step, or when you're a student, how do you figure out what company to go to or what job to do next? I think the number one thing that I would share with the students is success is a destination. It's not really, success is a journey, not a destination. You have to think about your plans or your blocks, right? Look for the first job and get in that job, do really well, excel, nothing can kind of take over your ability to deliver and do a really good job, and then go from there.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that information. I'd like to open the floor now for questions. You can raise your hand with the raised hand function inside Zoom, or you can put it in the chat to Ileana, and she'll be glad to transfer your question that way. So please don't be shy and take advantage of having Ms. Esther here. I'd like to start by just asking you a question, if I may, about Bank of America. It's one of the premier financial institutions in the world, and you moved over from JPMorgan Chase. Why is Bank of America such a great place to work for you, from your perspective?
I think the number one thing about Bank of America is that it's giving me the opportunity to grow. So when I was at JP Morgan, or when I was thinking about my next role, I actually thought about the job versus the company first, to see kind of where can I go from a career perspective. What do I want to do next? What do I want to learn more? So when I started my career, like I said, I was doing finance, so more of the technical sides of finance. As I grew at JPMorgan Chase, I found myself being more interested in actually being more apt and better at doing more strategy work. So after a few years at JP Morgan, I was looking for a role that was really more in the enterprise strategy space. So my kind of secret sauce, and I'll talk about this, kind of, you have to figure out what is your thing. My thing is really strategy. Like, I can think of things end to end. It's something that just comes naturally to me. So I was looking for a role where I could lean into my strengths and really excel from that perspective. And I had a huge network that was at JP Morgan, had moved to Bank of America. As you guys start your professional career, you'll find that Wall Street seems very big until you are in it, and it seems very small. Folks move from job to job, from bank to bank, quite often at this point. There's no expectation that you're gonna do 25 plus years at one company anymore. So I think, mobility across teams within your company, or mobility across companies, is a natural thing at this point. So this role at Bank of America presented itself, whereas I would be able to do to do strategy fully as 100% of my job. So, and a couple of people from my network said, hey, it's a good place to work, come over and see how it goes. So I've really loved my time here at Bank of America. I think the number one thing is growth. I have to, when I'm in a role, I'm in a company, I have to be able to see kind of what is the growth pattern. Is there an opportunity here where I can apply my skills and do really well, where I can excel? Basically, I want to be able to excel to my full potential. And if the company is able to give me that runaway, that's really what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Yeah.
May? I did not mean to clap, I just meant to raise my hand. But, hi, I was just wondering, so I'm also working in finance as well. And I know I hear a lot about being either a jack of all trades or a subject matter expert, but when you're starting out and you're trying to figure out which path you want to take, how do you think about that? And from also the JP Morgan and Goldman way versus more of a Bank of America and more retail based way, how would you distinguish the two?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that Bank of America and JP Morgan are very similar in size and scope in the kind of clients that they cover. So JP Morgan obviously has the Chase part of it, which is more of the retail, just like Bank of America. And then Bank of America also has the Merrill, which is the investment, more advising side of the bank. So they're very similar in that way, from what kind of clients do we serve? So I would say being a jack of all trades versus being, a what I would call a generalist, being able to understand everything or most things. So I would say when you start out in your career, it's actually better to be a generalist. So what happened is that if you join a company within one of these development programs, what they actually do is they'll start out with 2 to 3 weeks of training, or they bring in an external company to train you on, let's say, financial statements for banking. Similar things that you learn in college, but they're gonna focus it more on how does it work at this bank. So after that, you're gonna do 2 rotations or more. So what happens is that you'll do a rotation in one line of business and do a second one in a different line of business. What they're trying to develop is your ability to work in different functions. Because as the analyst starting in, if you were starting in just one job and let's say you spent 5 years in that job, you become very much of a specialist, right? You understand that one product. but which is fine. But then when you start hitting the vice president level, you have to be more of a generalist, because you're gonna be able to hire people, you're gonna be a manager, and you have to be able to manage people that have different experiences than you have, that have worked in different parts of the bank. So as you grow in your career as an analyst, if you're not part of a rotational program, I would say after 3 years in your first role, to raise your hand to look for something different, because you want to be able to flex your muscles. You want to be able to flex your finance muscles. Hey, I understand fixed income as a product. Do I understand a retail product? That's very much key, because if you think about way down the line, when you become a managing director or an executive director, again, your role and scope keeps growing. So I would say, like, what folks that I've seen that are at the managing director level have rarely spent their entire career in one product. They may have spent a majority of their career, but at some point, actually, when the bank wants you to move up, they'll ask you to take a completely different job that you've never done before. An example of that is Marion Lake, who was the previous CFO of JPMorgan. She was one of the folks that I really looked up to when I was there. She spent most of her career in finance, right? She became the CFO, which is the ultimate job. You are the CFO of JPMorgan Chase. What else could you do? It's like you are the pinnacle of your career. But she actually took a role to be the CEO of a smaller line of business, of part of the bank. And you would think, why would I be the CFO of the entire bank and then go be the CEO of one part of the bank, right? The reason for that is because it's a completely different muscle. It's a different skill set. Understanding finance, obviously, for all of JPMorgan, you literally are a genius from a technical accounting perspective, but managing a P&L, like understanding revenues that are coming in and how do you drive business growth and who to hire, how many bankers you need, that's a completely different skill set that you have to flex. So even at her level, right, she made what we would think externally looking at it as a lateral move or a smaller move. However, it's a completely different job. So if, for example, now if someone was to call her to be the CEO of an entire bank, right, it's like, okay, she's actually been a CEO of a line of business, and she's been the CFO of all of JPMorgan. So that's an example at like somebody at the very top of their career. But I always advise folks to try to do that throughout your career. It may not always present itself like every 3 years you get a job that's completely different, but try to do it as much as possible. What I did when I was in finance and how I was able to move to strategy is that I just made it like 20% of part of my job. So I did my finance job and I would raise my hand and say, hey, do you guys have any like initiatives that I can work on? I feel like I'm really good at this stuff. I'll just do it as like an additional part of my job or 20% of my job. And over the years, it just kind of kept growing to the point where when the role at Bank of America presented itself, I was able to go to strategy 100%. But starting out in that program, that didn't present itself as an analyst, right? It was like, okay, you're doing more finance, technical role, but I knew that's something I wanted, and I just kind of introduced it over time in my job.
Thank you.
I love talking to business students. It's like you are speaking the same language.
I will ask a more general question,
Sure.
where our students will ask you very industry-related questions. Do you have any tips on making connections and networking? A lot of our students are going to be experiencing what it's like working in person or working remotely, and it kind of makes that communication and interpersonal relationships a little difficult because everyone's just been closed in for the past 2 years. So do you have any advice or any tips on networking or just getting past that initial awkwardness?
Absolutely. And it'll sound like this was a planted question, but it wasn't. I actually have a PACE example. How sway. So I remember when I went to PACE, my family were from Haiti, so I've been around people that look like me, but I went to School of Upstate New York where people, generally do not look like me. So I was kind of already used to that a little bit. But then when I came to PACE, I was actually I had never kind of worked or lived or been in close communication and contact with folks from, with folks from Indian descent or, so it was very much of a new culture for me when I was at PACE. And I actually got to work with a lot of the students at Lubin. We're in the same classes together and I understand their culture, understand the food. So actually when I joined JPMorgan, about 90% of my team was from India. So I just think about if I had never had this experience in college working with students, it would be a very much of a culture shock for me. So what I would say is that you try to make as many connections as possible and try to be in groups and participate in clubs for people who don't look like you. Because when you enter into the professional environment, there is 100% chance that your team is not going to be kind of your copies of you. It's not going to look like Thanksgiving. So you want to train that muscle. It's very easy to say, okay, I'm a Black student, I'm going to only join the Black Student Union or the Caribbean Student Association. I was comfortable in these groups, but the likelihood that I was going to enter a workforce where everybody was like that was unlikely. So I made sure to, interact and have friends and have real relationships with people that did not look like me. So I think that's the number one thing from a networking perspective is practice being outside of your comfort zone. Practice it in college. This is the best place. We're all just learning. We're all students. We're all from different backgrounds. So if you feel awkward, the next person feels awkward. If you don't know what they're eating, they probably have no idea what you're eating. So it's equal, right? Versus having to try it for the first time in the professional environment. So I would say use the campus as the place to keep practicing. If it feels awkward, go to a club that you would never go to a meeting, see what they're talking about. I think it also makes you very much more emotionally intelligent. So if you think about the workplace, right, and now kind of putting in my diversity, equity, and inclusion hat, what we're all talking about is everybody wants to belong, right? Everybody wants to feel comfortable in their workplace. But what we're finding is that folks like myself who are, having this conversation with senior managers about how do you create a diverse and inclusive workforce? What I think about, and I was speaking to a class of students, Professor Kelly's students about last week about this, is that if you yourself understand, right now as a student, a future business leader, what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like, then I'm not gonna have to teach this to you in 40 years. So this is a part of, networking, getting comfortable with everybody, really meeting people where they're at, understanding every student's skills. The next millionaire, the next billionaire, the next Bill Gates could be the kid sitting next to you in your Lubin class. Definitely take time to get, your classmates, right? We're all on this journey of success. We're all gonna be very successful in the future. I gotta tell you that, all my LinkedIn and all this Lubin students who all are doing our thing out there. So get to know your classmates. That's the first place to practice that networking. Versus when you go to a career fair and you're like, there's an employer and I want a job, this is an awkward conversation, I'm asking for something. If they're just, your classmates, you get to know them, get to know their culture, ask them what they do, what holidays they celebrate. That's how I practice it. And then when I entered the workforce, it was much easier for me because I didn't feel like this was an insurmountable. I had met people that had no idea, that I didn't know anything about at Pace for those 3 years that I was there. So it was definitely a lower barrier for me.
Thank you. I'm sure Dean Singleton has mentioned, but if you would like to raise your hand or direct your questions in the chat, I can read them for you, whatever you prefer.
And while you're doing it, let me follow on to what you just talked about, Roberta, about building diverse teams. What is the strategy that you've developed with your colleagues at Bank of America to help do that in the different operating units? And is it different in different lines of business?
Absolutely. So within Bank of America, I don't sit within their D&I team specifically, but I can talk to you about from my perspective as being on the executive board of NABA, a National Association of Black Accountants, where I actually helped manage relationships between that organization and 21 companies, Bank of America being one of them. So what I would say is, how do you create and build diverse teams? Some of the strategies that I've worked. I think, the first thing is, who are you getting into the door, right? Recruiting. That's a topic that always comes up. And sometimes when you speak to senior managers or different firms and they're talking about, recruiting diverse workforce, it sounds like literally we're trying to climb Mount Everest. This is an impossible task. What to do, where to go. It is honestly not complicated. It is about making sure that you are diversifying your pipeline. Who are you getting in the door? That's the number one thing, right? So if you are recruiting in a class of 100 students to come into your analyst class, and that could be across different line of businesses, you have to take a pause and say that, does that class represent my vice president class, right? Assuming that everybody's going to stay here, are these the people that I want to be leading my company? And if that's not the case, then you have a problem right there, because, you know, to attrition, some of that class is going to leave, but you want to be able to retain the best and the brightest diverse population. So the one thing that that's an easy target that you guys may hear as companies come to recruit on campus, they'll say like, oh, you know, PACE is a core school. There's this core school mechanism or this core school, you know, word that is out there. All it means is that, you know, PACE University is one of the schools that is part of the slate of schools that the company recruits from every single year. So we love that PACE is part of a core school. This was awesome for me. When they come, a lot of recruiters will come on campus. But what I suggest to firms is that it's fine to have your core schools, but look beyond that. Think about what other universities are out there that have a diverse population that you should be adding to your core school list, or additional organizations. So Alpha, Association for Latino Professionals in America, is also on campus, and other diverse organizations. What they do, similar to NABA, is that they kind of bridge the gap between the school and kind of the rest of the population. So NABA has 21 partner schools. So if a company recruits at NABA, you're getting PACE, but you're also getting 20 other schools represented from that list. So that in itself helps you to diversify your pipeline. Like, who or where are you posting your jobs? Are people understanding what the job description is? Also, are you going on campus? Are you speaking to students? Are you making them feel like there's a place for me at this company? Because sometimes, right, you see a job posted and you read it like, I'll never be able to do this. Like, it's kind of too far out of reach. Is the recruiter actually making the time to say, let me host an info session and explain to them a day in the life of that company, right? Like, what is your job going to be like? Who are you going to be interacting with? Which is making it more palatable for folks to be able to join the company and also stay. So that's from an entry-level perspective. What I'll say is that another thing that I've seen over the past couple of years is that, you know, folks like myself will look up and see if the managing directors or if the senior leadership of the company is diverse. And that's something that is turning a lot of students away, or a lot of diverse professionals, to say that if I don't see myself represented at the top, then this is not a place where I can grow. So really challenging companies to let them know that this is something that we're looking at. So, you know, we're in 2021 at this point. You know, our companies and our leadership should look like the communities where we live and serve. So while we're working towards that, it's worth it to look out and try to recruit diverse, very senior professionals, and to make sure that they're bringing that thought leadership, that they're bringing that diverse perspective, which will in turn help to retain folks like myself within the firms.
That's a great point. I'm also interested in from the university's perspective. You know, it's one of the real strengths of PACE, and it's been that way since its founding in 1906. A very diverse student population. You know, we were into diversity when diversity wasn't cool way back then. So how can I and other people from PACE, can we leverage that to help provide more opportunities for our students? What could we do at Bank of America? What could we do, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like earlier in the summer, there was that conversation was happening where companies, because they're getting pressure of, you gotta have a diverse workforce, they're putting the same pressure on the universities, which is, show me your diverse students. So I think the bar is higher for everybody. Like, we all have to make sure that we are inclusive in our practices, inclusive in our admission practices, inclusive into where we're recruiting students for the universities, which in turn, when Bank of America comes to recruit at PACE, that they themselves are getting a diverse slate of students. So it's just kind of like very much of a trickle down effect. So I think, you know, there's a pressure point in all ends right now. It's like an imperative that we all have to put our hands together, you know, put our heads together to do better. I think from a university perspective, you know, going out to different high schools. I think some universities, I don't believe PACE is one of them, because my peers and the students that I met were really from all over the place. There wasn't any indication of these are only from preparatory high schools. So it's to make sure that when you are doing your recruitment strategy as a university, one, that you're starting early, right? The students are thinking about college, sophomore, junior year. That you're working with guidance counselors, that you are looking past some of the, you know, the more standard checklists, which is your GPA, your SAT scores, that we're looking at the whole student. especially toward the pandemic, I think it's interesting how universities have been, thinking about who are we going to take, because students have been going through a lot, right? They have so many different personal challenges that their GPA may have slipped a little bit, right? They may have not been able to make it to the SAT testing. How do we look at the whole person to make sure that we're recruiting a diverse slate of students to attend the universities, which in turn feeds into the workforce, right? I think universities have a huge role to play here. And when the students are in campus, what kind of support are we providing? I think, every student is an individual, right? Like, there's so many of us at each of the colleges, but every student is an individual. I think providing support, whereas as counseling, to make sure that we actually are retaining the students, that people aren't dropping out because they had a bump in the road, they had an obstacle, there was a family member who passed away, and that's completely derailed their education. How can we, as a university, be a safety net to be able to say, you're a sophomore, right? There's a bump in the road. What can we do? Do you need to take a semester off? What can we do to make sure that we retain you as a student, so that you are successful in your future career? I think being more flexible, being able to flex and flow as needed, given the current socioeconomic environment.
Excellent, thank you.
Krishi?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I had a question that what advice you might give us for making our resume and plan? Some advices for making our resume as a Lubin student. What are the common topics or common things we should have in our resume?
Okay. I think your resume is really on paper and not on LinkedIn as well. You want to have a virtual version of your resume, which is on LinkedIn. Every student should have a LinkedIn, especially every business student. It should really be a representation of who you are and what you've been doing so far. But understand that you cannot capture you as a person on one page. You have to just do your best to give a flavor. It's really just a representation. It's not going to capture everything, which is why I love LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has way more fields and space, and you can add projects on LinkedIn. You can add links to productions that you've done. If, for example, you're a marketing student, you can add, links to your portfolio of work, where the employers can really take a look and get a better understanding of who you are beyond what's on the one page. So in terms of the basics of what should be on that one page, I think, as a student, you should have an objective statement, which is who I am and what I'm trying to do, because you most likely don't have extensive work experience to point to your career path. You want to be able to express that in one sentence. Okay. This is who I am and this is what I'm trying to do. After that, you want to make sure that you have, if you see your GPA, your graduation year, things like that. Are you part of the Lubin School of Business? If you're part of the Pforzheimer's Honors College, anything that points to your achievements, right? Now, very importantly is if you're part of any organizations on campus or outside of campus, how are you able to show your leadership skills? Right now, right, employers are really looking beyond the GPA. So let's say you have a 3.8 GPA, that's awesome. You may still get beat out by a student that has a 3.4 GPA because they've been able to demonstrate their skills in a tangible way. So I would say I cannot stress enough the importance of being involved in organizations, either on campus or any other nonprofits that you guys can find, being on boards, being on junior boards. You have to be able to show tangibly, this is how I was able to lead. Now, how you can leverage your courses at Lubin is that you can make sure that when you're doing your team projects, that you can express that as well. Hey, I worked on a project that was a team of 4 people. This was my role in the project. I was responsible for the marketing. This is the business case that I was able to write. Or if you're in any entrepreneurship classes, we actually have to write a business case for a business. So some things that you do in class, we think, oh my God, it's just another 20-page paper, but it's training you for real life, and leverage that and be able to express it in a professional way. And your professors can help you with that, right? How do I write this on my resume? How do I express this project? Probably read the syllabus, it's probably right there on how to express this project on your resume. So, leverage the things that you're doing on campus, but look for ways to be more involved, because that's how you're able to show your ability to lead. Myself as a student leader, when I joined NABA as a sophomore, and I was the president the last 2 years when I was at Pace University, I cannot tell you guys enough how much training I give myself as a leader by being part of that organization. And it can be any organization. So, being the president of anything while you're on campus, you're young, so you're just overall inexperienced, but you have to lead your peers, which is what I have to do at my job today. You have to be able to lead your peers. You have to think about it, right? These students have, they're students just like you. So you have created this kind of hierarchy where you're the president and they're the vice president or they're the treasurer, and you have to give instructions. You have to lead. Leading is not something you can learn from a book. You can take a leadership class, you can take 50 leadership classes. You have to practice. And the fact that I was able to lead in some respect, I cannot say always successfully, but being able to put on events on campus and being able to work with staff, student development office to get budget, being able to reach out to speakers, being able to purchase items, like allocating my budget, figuring out where the money was going to go, purchasing gift for speakers, writing a business email to invite a senior person to campus. This is literally free practice. This is management training that you're getting while on campus, and you have a safety net, right? If you mess up, you're a student. If you need help, get the dean to help, reach out to the senior person, call the student development office, get your professor to reach out. You have so much just literally safety net around you that this is the perfect time for you to flex. I looked at college as really my opportunity to just spread my wings and fly. And I cannot tell you how many times this has rewarded me in the future. When I joined JPMorgan, I was able to lead kind of at JPMorgan. They also recruit with NABA. I was able to lead like a junior committee of folks that JPMorgan had recruited from NABA to lead like a JPMorgan Chase NABA steering committee. These were, again, all my peers. They were maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me. We had recruited them from PACE or from NABA, and they were all at JPMorgan. We're all professionals, but being able to lead that group, I just took the exact playbook that I was able to perfect after 2 years at Pace University of leading my campus organization, and I was able to apply it. And a lot of my managers were very surprised in my ability to lead at such a young age. When I first started managing people, when I had an intern report to me or an analyst report to me, a lot of the kinks, I had already worked it out. How do you speak to people? How do you motivate people? How do you get people to do things they don't want to do when they have 3 finals coming up and you have an event in the same week? How do you manage that? All of that, you can use this campus environment to really, it's really a time and place to do the most, like do everything you can do. It's a great practice.
Thank you so much. It will help me a lot.
I saw another hand raised. Maybe the person dropped off.
Let me jump in with another one while we're waiting on somebody else. So many successful people like you are very good at time management because there's only so many hours in a day. Could you share with us, what your typical day is like? How do you spend your day?
Absolutely. I'm a new mom. I have a 15-month-old, so I have no typical day.
Congratulations.
But before then, when my life was much more organized, I think, I would not say I'm the best at time management. My business partner and my friend, she's a project manager, and she times everything out for the week. So I'd say the number one tip that I've learned from her that I continue to try to implement into my daily life is to plan the day before. So on Sunday night, we have the Sunday blues, like, oh my God, we're dreading, it's class tomorrow morning, I have to work, I have my internship. This week is going to be overwhelming. The way to kind of undercut that is to spend literally an hour on Sunday night and to say, this is 5 days, this is everything I have to do. This is when I have this exam due, this is when I have to speak to these clients. You just time it all out on Sunday night. Now, time management is not about being like restrictive, where it's like, okay, I set 1 hour for social media. If I go on an hour and 5 minutes, my whole week falls apart. It just gives you predictability. Everything that's going to happen is all laid out, hopefully in a calendar, in a journal, or whatever mechanism you want to use. There's so many apps out there that help you time manage. But it's that you can predict where kind of, things are going to fall. So, that I have to prepare for this one team presentation on Thursday at 5 p.m. I need 2 hours earlier that week to get that done. So you map that out. Now, if something happens where you're not getting that 2 hours, you just know that you're going to have to fit in that preparation for the team presentation at some other point during the week. All it does is gives you predictability. So you're not reacting to your life, you're proactive. So you wake up every day, you know what's on the docket. and you can proactively manage things as they come. So I knew for weeks and weeks and weeks that I had this event today at 12 noon. On Friday, whatever plan I had fell apart, work got really busy, and I was like, things are just falling, dominoes are falling, where it's really looking bad for Monday morning. So I just knew that this morning I just had to get a head start. And I just let my managers know I have to step away for a couple of hours. I'm gonna come back to this by the end of the day. But that's because I knew that from last week, right, that things were happening that were gonna affect what I had to do on Monday. Some of it is in my control, some of it is out of my control. So I think the number one, thing to think about is about time management is two things. One, use a tool, right? Do not use your memory. Studies have showed that people are really bad at multitasking. If you're doing 3 things at a time, you're doing one thing well, and the other 2 things you're really halfway doing them. So use a tool. Don't think you're going to remember everything you have to do. Use your calendar, use a journal, write everything down, have a checklist, whatever tool works for you. And, different tools work for different people. So that's the number one thing. And the second thing is plan ahead. Plan your week, on Sunday night, plan your day the night before. So if you get to Tuesday and really the first half of the week is really falling apart where things are coming up, take another 30 minutes and reset. What is the rest of the week going to look like? So you're not honestly waking up every day and proactively just doing fire drills, like this issue, that issue. You guys will hear the word fire drill when you get into work. It's just things happening that are outside of your control and you don't know how to react to it. But if you plan ahead, then you can, proactively manage what's happening in your day.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a
May I just
question.
say something?
Oh, Tamara, go for it.
Hey, thank you, Liliana. So first, I'd like to just applaud Roberta. She is one of our Uber alums. And Roberta, you were so generous with your time, and I just want to thank you for that. If you only knew the number of events and activities she was involved with just this semester alone with me, it's impossible. So you must be planning and planning just even in your sleep. Let me put it that way. Roberta, I wanted to ask you, because I believe you started your own organization. It's called Young Ambitious One, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to tell us more about your organization?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm a partner at an organization called Young Ambitious One. We call it YAO. And really it's a career and learning development platform. So I met this young woman at an event. Oh, another case story. There's this organization called Women on Wall Street. And basically they reach out to different universities and say, nominate students that you think, are top performers for this special program. So what it is like, for the summer that you're interning, and the requirements, so you have to have a certain GPA, you have to be nominated by a business school staff or dean. And while you're interning on Wall Street during the summer, there's this after intern program, like from 6 to 8 p.m., 2 or 3 times a week, where you meet with other young women that are interning on Wall Street to kind of create this community. And they, you get to interact with companies, they help you get jobs if you don't land a job with your internship, etc. So I met this young woman at that program while I was interning at JPMorgan Chase. And basically we kind of connected, and we're the only 2 Black women in the program at the time. And we just said, we're going to keep in touch. Let's see how this goes. We're going to tour internships and things like that. So after we both graduated from college, we met up again. And she wanted to start this organization for young, ambitious people like ourselves who felt like we didn't really have a community that everybody was like us and we all were striving for success. So that's how it started. I started as a network after kind of happy hour meetup group in the beginning. But over time, we've developed into this learning and career development platform. We actually partner with universities. We've been at PACE before in the past, where we offer career development workshops, resume writing, career building, confidence building for women of color, which is sometimes hard for us to walk into a work environment and really be confident in who we are and what we bring to the table. We also offer like technical workshops, which is my colleague, she is in cybersecurity. So we've done different workshops around cybersecurity and program and project management within the tech field. So we've done finance workshops. So we partner with universities to offer basically this additional learning, in addition to what you learn in class, in addition to what you're getting from career services, is more of a specialized and additional courses to help develop the students before they actually get to their workplace. Now, recently over the past few months, we've developed sessions where student professionals can book resume reviews with us, again, additional career building tools. We also partner with companies to help them really bridge that opportunity gap. So one thing that I always think about and I always share with people is that there's no lack of talented people of color. There's no lack of talented people out there for companies to recruit. It's all about, opportunity. Are students being given the opportunity to excel? Are they being given equal opportunity? So talent is created equal, but opportunity is not. So there's many companies out there doing this work, and we're happy to be one of them, which is really bridging the opportunity gap, right? You have an opportunity and I have talent. How do I help you to bridge that gap? So we're working the 360 with the employers, with the universities, and with the individual. With the individual, we're helping them develop to be ready for that opportunity. With the universities, we're partnering with them to offer workshops. And then with the companies, we're bringing them to our network and say, hey, I have this network of highly skilled students that you can really recruit from. And also I have a partnership with XYZ University. I can help to connect you to help you recruit from them as well. So we currently have a couple of projects going on with a few CUNY schools where we're doing multi-semester workshops, delivering programs end to end for entrepreneurship. So we have entrepreneurship programs at Pace, but not every school has them. So we've been able to come in and actually build out entire curriculums for a specific student population, let's say 45 students at a specific CUNY school, to help to deliver those workshops, to help the students actually build out a business, a real business, present a business case, participate in competitions to win different prizes, to really help to spread out the knowledge of entrepreneurship to a broader population of people.
Wow, thank you for that, Roberta.
Absolutely.
I'm just gonna ask the final question and bring it back to Pace. What was the most impactful relationship you established during your time at Pace? Did you have a mentor? Was there a professor that really helped you along the way? Can you speak to that?
Sure. I honestly cannot pick one. It's just been a mosaic of people that I would just not expect. So I'll share with you guys, while I was at Pace University, there was the earthquake in 2010 that hit in Haiti, in my home country. And that had a huge impact on my family, on myself as a student, and my ability to honestly just function on a day-to-day basis, go to class, et cetera, and many other impacts. And I felt like at that time, I was able to go to different services at Pace and just explain that I am not 100% right now. I have been, a stellar student up to now, but I honestly just need some time to figure out what's going on financially, personally. We were making calls. Do I have all my family members accounted for? So these are some of the things, right, that can happen to a student or a specific student body, similar to how COVID happened, that can really have an impact on the person and their ability to be successful. So I think a couple of things would have happened during that time, right? My classes could have been dropped and I could have dropped out of Pace, or I could have been where I am today. So I think it kind of speaks to the kind of place this was for me, where it allowed me to continue on my studies, allowed me to excel, and just feel like I can just keep doing what I need to do and not worry about some of the kind of, unintended consequences of that happening in Haiti at the time. So it was all over the news, and I never felt like, students were kind of looking at me any differently. I mean, people had questions like, oh, I want you from Haiti, what's happening with the earthquake? But I just felt like overall, I was supported through that process. I was able to speak to different people and say, I literally just need time. Like, time was the thing. I need time to get through this semester. Like, I just need time. And just folks from different services offered at Pace University, like I mentioned, were able to support me in that. I think about my final senior thesis, my professor there, just so many professors have reached out to me even after I left Pace University, because we had built such a great relationship. I definitely always speak to and remember Dean Lindburn, that is no longer with us. When I heard that she passed, I was so heartbroken, because I just remember that, again, there were times where I just needed some time. And she would be able to email a professor and say, really, Roberta just needs a week, and she'll be back to 100%. And that's all I needed was 7 days to just breathe and come back. So she was able to help me get my degree in 3 years. We really made a way out of no way. I don't think I could have afforded to go to Pace for a 4th year, to be honest. So it was just so many instances where I reached out to people and they were willing to help in whatever way they could, whether it was just to say, give her a week and she'll get you the paper, whether it was to say, you know, can I go to this class today? I'm going to come back tomorrow. Whether it was to say, hey, she can actually take 21 credits, even though we don't advise it. If she's doing really well, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. So I just felt like so many different professors and staff over the years that I was there really made me feel like I belong in this place and I'm able to succeed. And I cannot stress that enough. I think people go to college for, you know, different reasons, but I think it really gives you a platform. It defines a lot on kind of how you start your career. Do you feel like people believe in you and you're able to do anything that you want to do? And honestly, I carried that into corporate America, and I felt like, hey, if I was able to do this in school, let's see how this goes. And I had support system and people to reach out to kind of say, you know, I'm doing this project. I don't really know this new Excel formula. Can you help me? So I created a huge network, and I feel like I was overall just supported. So there's so many services, guys. We go to an amazing private school, so we have a lot of very fancy services. Reach out, like look up everything that Pace has to offer, utilize everything that is there for you. And the professors, I felt like honestly cared and they wanted to teach me, right? It wasn't an easy A. So when I passed the class with a good grade, I really knew the material. So if you feel like your classes are hard, it's not you, it is hard, but it's really worth it when you get into the workforce and you feel like you are doing really well.
Ms. Esther, I really want to thank you for your time today and sharing your insights, very valuable lessons that you've learned, and you're kind enough to share them with the students here. We have a small token of appreciation for your participation today. Unfortunately, I can't hand it to you through Zoom. So it'll be delivered to you in a few days. But I want to thank you so much for taking time out and making this such a valuable Dean's Roundtable, and thank the students for attending too. Okay. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.